Captain Jake Morrison stared at the screen showing the strange ships that had appeared near. Kepler to 442. The vessels looked like nothing he had ever seen before. They were huge, dark things that seemed to be made of metal and something that looked alive. The ships moved in perfect formation, like a school of fish swimming through the black ocean of space. "How many are there?" Jake asked his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Taylor. 17 large vessels, Captain. Each one is about 3 times the size of our ship. They're not showing any weapons, but those things look like they could eat us for breakfast. Jake nodded. His ship, the Aurora's Edge, was an exploration vessel, not a warship. They had been mapping new star systems for the past 2 years, looking for worlds that humans could settle. This was supposed to be a routine mission. Finding alien ships was definitely not routine. Commander Lisa Grant, the ship's science officer, looked up from her instruments. "Captain, I'm getting some very strange readings from those ships. They're giving off biological signatures mixed with artificial ones. It's like they're part machine and part living creature. Any idea what kind of life forms we're dealing with?" "Not yet, but whatever they are, they're definitely not from any world we know about. The biological patterns are completely different from anything in our databases." Jake felt a knot forming in his stomach. Humanity had been exploring space for over 200 years, and they had never found intelligent alien life. There had been plenty of planets with simple life forms, but nothing that could build ships and travel between stars. Now 17 alien vessels were sitting in space, waiting. "Captain," said Lieutenant Peters from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead ship. It's coming in on multiple frequencies at once. Put it through." The main screen changed to show a creature that made Jake's blood run cold. It stood about 7 feet tall and had smooth, gray skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Its head was larger than a human's, with no visible hair. But the most disturbing thing was its eyes. They were completely black, with no whites at all, and they seemed to look right through him. "I am War Prime Kethmoran of the Vexhai Empire," the creature said. Its voice was strange, like several people talking at the same time. "You are the species called humans. We have been watching your kind for some time." Jake stepped forward. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the Human Exploration Force. We come in peace." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Peace. Yes, we know of your concept of peace. We have studied your history through the signals you broadcast into space. Your wars, your conflicts, your endless fighting among yourselves. You speak of peace, but you have never known it." "We've had our problems," Jake admitted, "but we've learned from them. We've been at peace for over a century now." "Peace built on weakness," Kethmoran said. "You have spread to 17 star systems, yet you have no real military force. You waste resources on what you call art and entertainment. You form emotional bonds with other individuals, which makes you weak. You even sacrifice yourselves for strangers. These are the signs of a species that has lost its way." Lisa stepped up beside Jake. "We don't see those things as weaknesses. We see them as what makes us human." The alien's black eyes fixed on her. "You are the one called Lisa Grant. Your biological markers indicate you are what humans call a scientist. You study life forms. We are curious about your opinion of us." "You're fascinating," Lisa said carefully. "Your ship seemed to be a hybrid of biological and mechanical technology. That suggests a very advanced understanding of both biology and engineering." "We have conquered 43 civilizations," Kethmoran said with what sounded like pride. "Each one thought they were advanced. Each one was wrong. We have taken the best of their technology and biology and made it our own. We have become perfect through conquest." Ryan moved closer to Jake and whispered, "Captain, their weapon systems just came online. All 17 ships are now showing active targeting systems." Jake kept his face calm, but inside he was screaming. The Aurora's Edge had basic defensive shields and a few small weapons, but nothing that could stand against 17 ships the size of small cities. "War Prime Kethmoran," Jake said. "We're explorers, not conquerors." "We're not a threat to you or your empire. That is correct. You are not a threat. You are barely worth our attention. But you have something we want. What's that? Your worlds, your resources, your people to serve us. We have studied your species extensively. You are weak, but you can be useful. Humans reproduce quickly and can survive in many different environments. You will make adequate servants. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Servants? We're not going to be anyone's servants. You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. This is an announcement. We are telling you what will happen. You have 72 hours to contact your leaders and arrange for your surrender. If you refuse, we will demonstrate the price of defiance, and if we agree, then your species will be allowed to continue existing. You will work for us, serve us, and obey us. In return, we will not destroy your worlds. It is a generous offer. Lisa looked at the alien with disgust. You're talking about slavery. We are talking about survival, Kethmorin replied. Your species has two choices. Submit to us willingly, or be forced to submit after we destroy enough of your worlds to make you understand your place. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. You've made a mistake, Kethmorin. You think you know humans, because you've watched our old broadcasts, but you don't understand us at all. We understand you perfectly. You are a young species that has barely learned to travel between stars. You have no real weapons, no unity, no strength. You cling to concepts like individual freedom and personal choice, which make you weak and divided. You cannot stand against us. Maybe you're right, Jake said quietly. Maybe we are weak, maybe we are divided. But there's one thing about humans that you haven't figured out yet. What is that? We don't like being threatened. And we really don't like being told we're going to be slaves? You want to see what humans do when they're backed into a corner? You're about to find out. The alien's expression didn't change. Brave words from the captain of a small exploration ship. But words will not stop our fleet. You have 72 hours. Use them wisely. The transmission ended and the screen went black. Jake stood in the sudden silence, his mind racing. 17 alien ships, each one powerful enough to destroy his vessel without breaking a sweat. An entire empire that had conquered dozens of civilizations. And now they wanted to add humanity to their collection. Captain, Ryan said, what are our orders? Jake looked around at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for him to tell them what to do. These were good people, scientists, and explorers who had signed up to find new worlds and expand. Human knowledge. None of them had expected to become the first humans to face an alien invasion. Set course for Earth, Jake said. Maximum speed. We need to warn them what's coming. What about the alien ships? Lisa asked. They're not stopping. U.S. They want us to deliver their message? They're confident that we can't do anything to hurt them. Jake looked at the screen where the alien ships waited in the darkness. Maybe they're right. Maybe we can't fight them. But they made one mistake. What's that? Ryan asked. They told us we have 72 hours. That's 72 hours for humanity to prepare. And when humans are threatened, when their backs are against the wall, they tend to get creative. The Aurora's edge turned toward Earth, its engines pushing it faster than it had ever gone before. Behind them, the Vexi fleet waited with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run, but Jake Morrison was already thinking about something the alien War Prime had said. The Vexi didn't understand human concepts like sacrifice and emotional bonds. They saw these things as weaknesses. Maybe they were right. Or maybe they were about to learn that humanity's greatest weaknesses could also be their most dangerous strengths. War Prime Kethmorin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human ship disappear into the darkness. The small vessel was rushing back to warn its kind just as he had expected. The humans would gather their leaders, argue among themselves, and eventually realize they had no choice but to submit. It was always the same with new species. First came the shock, then the anger, then the desperate attempts to find a way out. Finally came acceptance. The Vexi had seen it 43 times before. War Prime, said Subcommander Vexthal, should we follow the human ship? No need. Let them run. Let them tell their leaders what they have seen. Fear will do our work for us. Kethmoran turned to look at the tactical display showing the human star systems. 17 worlds scattered across a small section of the galaxy. Their military forces were laughably weak. Most of their ships were designed for exploration or trade, not war. The few military vessels they had were primitive compared to Vexhi. Technology. The humans have named their species well, Kethmoran said. They are indeed human, which in their language means weak and emotional. They will not be difficult to break. But the War Prime had made a decision that would prove to be his greatest mistake. He was tired of waiting for species to surrender. The conquest of the last 3 civilizations had taken too long, because their leaders had refused to believe the Vexhi were serious about their threats. This time, he would provide a demonstration. Sub-Commander, select a target. Choose one of their agricultural worlds. Something with a large population but no military importance. Yes, War Prime. The world they call New Haven has 2.3 million inhabitants. It produces food for several other human colonies. Perfect. We will show the humans what happens to those who resist us. The Vexhi fleet moved toward New Haven with deadly purpose. The planet had no defenses except a small orbital station that monitored shipping traffic. The humans on the station sent out desperate warnings, but there was nothing they could do to stop what was coming, Captain. Jake Morrison was halfway to Earth when the news reached him. The communication came through on an emergency frequency, crackling with static and terror. This is New Haven control to all human ships. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. 17 alien vessels have entered our system. They are not responding to our communications. They are... Oh God, they're firing on the planet. The transmission cut off into static. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. He had known the aliens were dangerous, but he had hoped they would at least wait for humanity's answer before doing anything drastic. He had been wrong. Get me Admiral Kate Sullivan, he ordered. Emergency priority. Within minutes, the face of Admiral Sullivan appeared. On the screen. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had spent most of her career preparing for threats that never came. Now the biggest threat in human history was actually happening. Captain Morrison, I've been expecting your call. We received your initial report about the alien contact. What's the situation? Admiral, they've attacked New Haven. The whole planet is under assault. Sullivan's face went pale. Are you certain? We lost contact with New Haven Control 15 minutes ago. Admiral, these aliens aren't here to negotiate. They're here to conquer us. I'm ordering all available ships to New Haven immediately. We need to ... quote, Admiral, with respect, it's too late. They have 17 ships, each one bigger than anything we've ever built. By the time our ships get there, New Haven will be gone. Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. Captain, I need you to get to Earth as fast as possible. The Global Defense Council is meeting an emergency session. They need to hear your first-hand account of what we're dealing with. Jake nodded, but his mind was on the 2.3 million people on New Haven. Men, women, children who had done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place. When humanity encountered its first alien enemy, 3 hours later, the first reports came in from the attack on New Haven. What the humans learned made them realize they were facing something far worse than simple conquest. Dr. Alex Chun, a military psychologist attached to Admiral Sullivan's staff, watched the surveillance footage from a probe that had been hidden in the New Haven system. The images showed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Vexhi weapons didn't just destroy, they transformed. When the alien energy beams hit the surface of New Haven, the planet began to change. The ground turned black and started to move like it was alive. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, reaching out like grasping hands. The very air seemed to thicken and pulse with malevolent energy, but the worst part was what happened to the people. The Vexhi weapons didn't kill quickly. They trapped their victims in a living nightmare. The ground would grab people and hold them, keeping them alive while they screamed. The twisted trees would wrap around them but not crush them. Just hold them, letting them suffer. This isn't warfare, Dr. Chun told Admiral Sullivan as they watched the footage. This is torture on a planetary scale. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying these aliens don't just want to conquer us. They want us to suffer. Look at these weapons. They're designed to cause maximum pain and terror. The Vexai could have simply destroyed New Haven in minutes, but instead they're turning it into a hell where people are trapped and tortured. Admiral Sullivan stared at the screen showing New Haven's transformation. Why would they do this? I think they feed on it, not literally, but psychologically. They enjoy causing suffering. It's not just about defeating us, it's about breaking us completely, the reports kept coming in. The few survivors who had managed to escape New Haven told stories that sounded like nightmares. They spoke of the ground trying to pull them down, of buildings that screamed, of their friends and family trapped in a landscape that had become a living torture chamber. Captain Morrison arrived at Earth Defense Command 12 hours after the attack began. He found the place in chaos. Military officers were running back and forth, trying to organize a response to an enemy they didn't understand. Politicians were arguing about whether to surrender or fight. Scientists were frantically analyzing the alien technology, looking for weaknesses. Morrison was taken directly to the main briefing room, where the Global Defense Council was in session. Admiral Sullivan introduced him to the assembled leaders. Captain Morrison had direct contact with the alien commander, she said. He's the only person who has spoken to them face to face. General Marcus Stone, the head of Earth's military forces, looked at Morrison with tired eyes. Captain, tell us what we're dealing with. Morrison described his encounter with War Prime Kethmoran. He told them about the aliens' arrogance, about how the Vexai saw humans as weak and emotional. He explained how they had conquered 43 other civilizations and planned to make humanity their slaves. They think they understand us, Morrison concluded. They've studied our history through our old broadcasts. They think they know everything about human nature. But they've made a mistake. What kind of mistake? Asked President Maria Santos. They think our emotions make us weak. They think our individual freedoms make us divided. They think our willingness to sacrifice for others makes us stupid. They're wrong about all of it. General Stone leaned forward. Captain, we appreciate your optimism, but we need to face facts. They have superior technology, superior numbers, and they've just turned an entire planet into a torture chamber. What exactly can we do against that? Morrison was quiet for a moment. Then he looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. General, they brought hell to New Haven. They think that showing us what they can do will make us surrender. But they don't understand what happens when you threaten a human's family. What happens? President Santos asked. We don't just fight back. We get creative. And when humans get creative about warfare, things get very dark very quickly. Dr. Chun spoke up from the back of the room. Captain, are you suggesting we develop new weapons? I'm suggesting we develop new ways of thinking about warfare. The Vexai have superior technology, but they have a weakness. They don't understand individual psychology. They've never had to deal with the kind of mental warfare that humans are capable of. Admiral Sullivan looked at Morrison with new interest. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we stop trying to fight them with ships and guns. I'm proposing we fight them with something they've never encountered before. Something that will make them wish they had never heard of humanity. The room fell silent. Outside, the reports from New Haven continued to come in. The planet was completely transformed now. A world of living nightmares where 2.3 million people were trapped in endless torment. The Vexai had brought hell to humanity. But they were about to discover that humans had their own version of hell, and it was far more terrifying than anything the aliens could imagine. 3 weeks after the destruction of New Haven, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the shuttle bay of the small diplomatic vessel Harmony. He was about to do something that many people thought was suicide. He was going to meet with War Prime Kethmoran. Again, this time to deliver humanity's response to the alien ultimatum, but this wasn't a surrender mission. This was something much more dangerous. Are you sure about this, Captain? Asked Dr. Helen Barnes, the specialist in alien psychology who would be accompanying him. Once we start this, there's no going back. Morrison looked at her. Dr. Barnes was a small woman with gray hair and gentle eyes, but she had spent the last 3 weeks developing weapons that could destroy minds instead of bodies. Doctor, after what they did to New Haven, I'm sure those people are still screaming down there. The Vexi wanted to show us hell. Now it's our turn. Lieutenant Sam Davis, their communications expert, checked his equipment one final time. All systems are ready, Captain. The hidden transmitters are online and the psychological warfare protocols are loaded. The plan was simple but terrifying. The humans had spent weeks studying every piece of information they could find about the Vexi. They had analyzed the alien broadcast, studied their behavior patterns, and discovered something crucial about their enemy. The Vexi shared a collective consciousness. They could communicate with each other through their minds, sharing thoughts and experiences instantly across their entire fleet. It was this shared mind that made them so effective as conquerors. They could coordinate perfectly, think as one, and never suffer from the doubts and fears that plague individual minds. But Dr. Barnes had realized that this strength was also their greatest weakness. The Vexi had never developed the mental defenses that humans took for granted. They had never learned to protect themselves from psychological attacks because they had never encountered a species that could wage war on the mind itself. Remember, Dr. Barnes said as they prepared to dock with the Vexi flagship, we're not just fighting one alien. We're fighting their entire collective consciousness. But that also means that anything we do to one of them affects all of them. The shuttle docked with the massive alien vessel, and Morrison led his small team through corridors that seemed to pulse with organic life. The walls were covered with a substance that looked like living tissue, and the air smelled of something that was part machine oil and part decay. War Prime Kethmoran was waiting for them in the same chamber where they had first met. The alien looked exactly as Morrison remembered, tall and imposing with those terrible black eyes that seemed to see through everything. Captain Morrison, the alien said, his voice carrying that strange quality of multiple speakers, I am pleased that you have come to deliver your species' surrender. The demonstration on New Haven was effective, yes? It was very effective, Morrison replied. You showed us exactly what kind of enemy we're dealing with. Good, then you understand that resistance is futile. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your ships cannot match ours. Your people cannot endure what we did to New Haven. Dr. Barnes stepped forward. War Prime, before we discuss surrender terms, I would like to conduct a brief psychological evaluation. It's standard procedure for first contact situations. The alien looked at her with what might have been amusement. You wish to study our minds? How curious. Very well, we are not concerned with your primitive understanding of psychology. This was exactly what Dr. Barnes had been hoping for. She began her evaluation, asking seemingly innocent questions about Vexi society, their history, their methods of conquest. But hidden within her questions were carefully crafted psychological triggers. Tell me, War Prime, have you ever experienced doubt about your actions? Doubt is a weakness we eliminated long ago. I see, and fear? Do the Vexi experience fear? Fear is for lesser species. We are beyond such things. Fascinating. What about the concept of individual identity? Do you see yourself as separate from other Vexi? For the first time, the alien paused. We are ... we are one, we are many, we are... The War Prime's voice wavered slightly. Dr. Barnes pressed on. But you said we are... Who is we? Are you Kethmoran, or are you something else? The alien's black eyes flickered. Through their shared consciousness, this simple question was spreading to every Vexi in the fleet. For the first time in their evolutionary history, they were being forced to consider the possibility that their collective identity might be an illusion. While Dr. Barnes continued her psychological assault, Lieutenant Davis began his part of the mission. He started transmitting what appeared to be standard diplomatic data, but hidden within the information streams were what the humans called conceptual viruses. These weren't computer viruses that attacked machines. They were ideas specifically designed to attack the Vexi way of thinking. Concepts about individual mortality, about the meaninglessness of existence, about the possibility that their conquests were nothing more than the actions of a species too afraid to face the emptiness of the universe. "Captain," Davis whispered, "the first transmission is complete?" "The concepts are spreading through their network," Morrison nodded. The psychological warfare campaign had begun. Now came the hardest part. They had to keep the aliens talking long enough for the mental attack to take hold. "War Prime," Morrison said. "Before we agree to surrender, I have a question. In all your conquests, have you ever wondered why you do it? We conquer because we are superior. We bring order to chaos. But why do you need to bring order? What are you afraid will happen if you don't?" The alien's expression changed. The question was simple, but it was forcing the Vexhai to confront something they had never considered. Why did they need to conquer? What drove them to spread across the galaxy, subjugating other species? Dr. Barnes saw the opening and struck. "War Prime, I want you to imagine something. Imagine that you are alone, completely alone. No other Vexhai voices in your mind. No collective consciousness. Just you, by yourself, in the darkness of space." The alien's eyes widened. That is not possible. "We are never alone? But what if you were? What if the voices in your mind stopped talking? What if you had to face the universe with only your own thoughts?" Across the Vexhai fleet, something unprecedented was happening. Individual aliens were beginning to experience what humans called existential terror. The idea of being alone, of having to face existence without the comfort of the collective, was spreading like a disease through their shared consciousness. "Lieutenant." Davis monitored the alien communications network. "Captain, their fleet coordination is breaking down. Ships are losing formation. I'm detecting panic signals from multiple vessels." War Prime Kethmoran was beginning to shake. "Stop this. Stop these questions. We do not wish to hear more." "But you can't stop thinking about it now, can you?" Dr. Barnes said softly. "The idea is in your mind. The possibility that you might be alone. That everything you've done, every world you've conquered, might be meaningless." The alien commander tried to speak, but no words came. For the first time in Vexhai history, an individual was experiencing what humans called a panic attack. And because of their collective consciousness, every Vexhai in the fleet was experiencing it with him. We are many door one. The War Prime stammered, but the words sounded hollow now. "Are you?" Morrison asked. "Or are you just scared individuals pretending to be part of something bigger so you don't have to face the fact that you're all alone in a universe that doesn't care about you?" The psychological attack was working better than they had hoped. The concepts that humans struggled with every day, loneliness, meaninglessness, individual mortality, were completely foreign to the Vexhai. They had no defense against these ideas because they had never needed one. Dr. Barnes delivered the final blow. "War Prime, I want you to consider one more possibility. What if your collective consciousness is just an illusion? What if you're all separate individuals who are too afraid to admit it?" The alien let out a sound that was part scream and part electronic feedback. Across the fleet, Vexhai warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds were collapsing as their minds tried to process concepts they were never meant to understand. "We need to go," Morrison said quietly. "The first phase is complete." As they returned to their shuttle, they could see the effects of their psychological warfare spreading through the alien fleet. Ships that had moved in perfect formation were now drifting aimlessly. The powerful Vexhai war machine was being destroyed not by weapons, but by ideas. The humans had brought something to the galaxy that the Vexhai had never encountered before. Not superior technology or greater numbers, but the capacity to wage war on the mind itself. And in that war, humanity's greatest weaknesses, their doubts, their fears, their individual struggles with existence, had become their most powerful weapons. The Vexhai had wanted to show humanity hell. Instead, they had discovered that humans carried something much darker inside them, the ability to make their enemies question their very right to exist. War Prime Kethmoran sat alone in his command chamber, staring at the walls that seemed to pulse with dying light. For the first time in his species' history, a HFY was truly alone. The voices that had always filled his mind, the constant connection to his people's collective consciousness, were gone. Around him, his flagship drifted through space without purpose. The perfect formation that had once defined HFY military might have collapsed into chaos. Ships wandered aimlessly through the darkness, their crews trapped in nightmares they couldn't understand. The humans had done something impossible. They had taken the HFY's greatest strength and turned it into their greatest weakness. The collective consciousness that had allowed them to conquer 43 civilizations was now spreading terror and confusion through their entire fleet. "War Prime," came a weak voice from the communication system. It was Sub-Commander Vexel, but he sounded nothing like the confident officer he had been just days before. "The fleet, ... The fleet is falling apart. Our warriors are refusing orders. Some have locked themselves in their quarters, others are doing things to themselves." Keth Moran tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. How could he give orders when he wasn't even sure who he was anymore? The humans had planted a terrible seed in his mind, and it was growing like a cancer through his thoughts. Am I Keth Moran? Or am I just one voice in a collective that pretends to be many individuals? Do I exist, or am I just an illusion created by a shared consciousness that is too afraid to face the truth? The questions burned in his mind like acid. Every time he tried to push them away, they came back stronger, and through the damaged remnants of the collective consciousness, he could feel that every other HFY was struggling with the same terrible doubts. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the reports coming in from their surveillance drones. The alien fleet that had seemed so terrifying just weeks before was now a collection of drifting ships filled with broken minds. "Admiral," said Commander Lisa Grant, who had been reassigned to the Psychological Warfare Division, "the HFY are experiencing complete mental breakdown. Their collective consciousness is fragmenting. Individual aliens are having what we can only describe as massive identity crises." Sullivan looked at the tactical display showing the alien fleet. "How is this possible? They conquered 43 civilizations. How can they be falling apart so quickly?" Dr. Helen Barnes, who had returned from her mission to the HFY flagship, explained what was happening. "Admiral, the HFY never developed individual psychology. They've lived their entire evolutionary history as a collective mind. They have no mental defenses against concepts like personal identity, individual mortality, or existential meaninglessness. You're saying they can't handle being alone? It's worse than that. They can't handle the idea that they might have always been alone. We've made them question whether their collective consciousness was ever real, or just a shared delusion to avoid facing the emptiness of individual existence." Captain Jake Morrison entered the briefing room, carrying a datapad with the latest intelligence reports. "Admiral, we've intercepted HFY communications. They're in complete chaos. Some ships are trying to flee the system. Others are just floating dead in space. What about their weapons? Are they still a threat?" "That's the strangest part," Morrison said. "They still have all their technology, but they can't use it effectively. When you don't know if you exist as an individual, it's hard to make decisions about firing weapons or following orders." Dr. Barnes nodded. "We've essentially given them a psychological virus that attacks the very foundation of their identity. Every HFY is now questioning who they are, why they exist, and whether any of their actions have meaning." Sullivan felt a chill run down her spine. "Doctor, what exactly have we done to them?" "We've done to their minds what they did to New Haven's landscape. We've turned their thoughts into a kind of living hell where they're trapped with questions they can't answer and fears they can't escape." The Admiral was quiet for a moment, thinking about the implications. Is this permanent? We don't know. The human mind deals with existential questions all the time. We've learned to live with doubt, with the fear of being alone, with the possibility that life has no meaning. But the HFY never developed those coping mechanisms. For them, these ideas are completely alien and terrifying. As if to prove her point, new reports started coming in from the alien fleet. HFY warriors who had once seemed unstoppable were now exhibiting behavior that their own species couldn't understand. Some had barricaded themselves in their quarters, refusing to come out. Others were sending desperate messages to their commanders, begging for reassurance that they still existed. The most disturbing reports came from the HFY medical bays. Aliens who had never experienced individual fear were now suffering from what humans would recognize as severe anxiety attacks. Their collective consciousness, once a source of strength, was now spreading panic and confusion faster than any disease. Sergeant Nina Torres, who led the special operations team responsible for infiltrating HFY communications, brought Admiral Sullivan the latest intelligence. "Ma'am, we've been monitoring their internal communications. It's single quotes s. It's hard to listen to. What are they saying? They're asking questions they've never had to ask before. Things like, am I real? And what happens when I die? And why do we exist?" Some of them are trying to contact their homeworlds, but they can't explain what's happening to them. Morrison looked at the reports with a mixture of satisfaction and horror. They wanted to break our spirit by showing us what they did to New Haven. Instead, we've broken their minds by showing them ideas they were never meant to understand. Dr. Barnes was studying the psychological profiles they had gathered on individual HFY. The most affected seemed to be their military commanders. The ones who were most confident in their superiority are now the most lost. War Prime Keth Morin appears to be in a complete state of mental collapse. What about their ability to continue the war? Sullivan asked. Effectively zero, Morrison replied. A military force that can't decide if it exists can't fight a war. They still have their ships and weapons, but they don't have the will to use them. But even as they celebrated their success, the humans were beginning to understand the full scope of what they had accomplished. They had created a form of warfare that was more devastating than any physical weapon. They had learned to destroy their enemies not by killing their bodies, but by shattering their minds. "Admiral," Dr. Barnes said quietly, "we need to discuss what happens next. The psychological warfare protocols we've developed, they're incredibly powerful, maybe too powerful." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've created weapons that can destroy the mental foundation of an entire species. The HFY aren't just defeated. They're psychologically shattered. Some of them may never recover from what we've done to them." Sullivan looked around the room at her officers. They had saved humanity from slavery and conquest, but the cost was becoming clear. They had turned themselves into something that could wage war on the mind itself. "The question now," Morrison said, "is what we do with this knowledge. We've proven that human psychological warfare can defeat even the most advanced alien civilizations. But do we want to be the kind of species that destroys minds instead of just winning battles?" Through the viewports of Earth Defense Command, they could see the HFY fleet in the distance, still drifting helplessly through space. 17 massive warships that had once threatened all of humanity were now floating monuments to the power of ideas to destroy as completely as any weapon. The HFY had brought hell to New Haven, turning it into a landscape of living torture. But humanity had responded with something darker, the ability to turn an enemy's own mind into a prison of doubt and terror, from which there might be no escape. As the reports continued to come in, showing more and more HFY succumbing to psychological breakdown, one question hung in the air above all others. In saving themselves from monsters, had the humans become something even worse? 6 months after the HFY invasion began, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the conference room of Earth Defense Command, looking at reports that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. The greatest military threat humanity had ever faced had been completely destroyed without firing a single shot. The HFY fleet still hung in space around the human colonies, but the ships were nothing more than metal shells drifting through the darkness. Inside them, the remnants of a once mighty civilization struggled with questions that had no answers and fears they couldn't escape. "Admiral," said Captain Jake Morrison as he entered the room. "The Global Defense Council is ready for your final report." Sullivan nodded, but she felt no joy in their victory. The cost of defeating the Vexi was becoming clearer every day, and it wasn't measured in ships destroyed or lives lost. It was measured in what humanity had become in order to survive. The council members filed into the room, their faces showing the strain of the past months. President Maria Santos looked older than her years. General Marcus Stone moved like a man carrying a terrible weight. Dr. Helen Barnes entered last, carrying the files that contained humanity's new weapons of mass psychological destruction. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sullivan began, "the Vexi threat is over. Their fleet is completely disabled. Their military structure has collapsed. They are no longer capable of organized resistance. What's the status of their remaining forces?" asked General Stone. Morrison answered. 17 ships, approximately 50,000 Vexi personnel. But they're not really personnel anymore. They're psychological casualties. Most of them can't function well enough to operate basic ship systems. Dr. Barnes opened her files. The psychological warfare campaign exceeded all expectations. The Vexi collective consciousness has been completely shattered. Individual aliens are experiencing what we can only describe as permanent existential crisis. President Santos leaned forward. "Doctor, be specific. What exactly have we done to them? We've destroyed their ability to believe in their own existence. Every Vexi is now trapped in a cycle of doubt and terror. They question whether they're real, whether their actions have meaning, whether they deserve to exist. For species that evolved as a collective mind, these are tortures worse than any physical pain." The room fell silent. Through the windows, they could see the Vexi ships in the distance, dark and lifeless against the stars. "There's more," Dr. Barnes continued. 3 days ago, we received a transmission from War Prime Keth Morin. It was ... difficult to listen to." She activated the recording. The voice that came through the speakers was barely recognizable as the confident alien commander who had threatened humanity months before. It was broken, desperate, filled with a kind of pain that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "Human commanders," the voice said, the one who was called Kethmoran begs for mercy? We cannot ... I cannot continue. The questions you have put in our minds, they do not stop. We offer you everything. Our technology, our ships, our knowledge. Of the 43 worlds we conquered. We will leave your space, never return, but please make the thoughts stop." The recording ended. President Santos looked pale. "He's begging us?" "It gets worse," Morrison said. "They're not just offering to leave, they're offering to share everything they know about advanced technology. Faster than light travel, energy weapons, biological engineering. They want to give us the knowledge that took them thousands of years to develop. In exchange for what?" Dr. Barnes answered. "They want us to promise never to use psychological warfare against another species. They're terrified that we might do to others what we did to them." General Stone shook his head. "I don't understand. They conquered 43 civilizations. They turned an entire planet into a torture chamber. Now they're afraid of us?" "General," Dr. Barnes said quietly, "what we did to them is worse than what they did to New Haven. The people on New Haven suffered, but they knew who they were. They knew they existed. The Vexi don't even have that certainty anymore." Dr. Alex Chun, the military psychologist who had first analyzed the Vexi threat, spoke up from his seat at the back of the room. "I've been studying the long-term effects of our psychological warfare campaign. The damage appears to be permanent. The Vexi may never recover their collective consciousness. They may spend the rest of their existence as isolated individuals, tortured by questions they can't answer." President Santos stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the alien ships. "So we've won. Humanity is safe. The Vexi will never threaten us again." "Yes, ma'am," Morrison replied. "But the question is, what kind of species have we become in order to achieve that victory?" The president turned back to face the room. "Explain." Morrison looked at his fellow officers before answering. Ma'am, we've developed weapons that can destroy the mind of any thinking being. We've proven that human psychological warfare can break even the most advanced alien civilizations. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge? Dr. Barnes opened another file. The psychological warfare protocols we used against the Vexhai are now part of our military database. We have detailed instructions on how to identify and exploit the mental weaknesses of any species we encounter. We could theoretically break the minds of entire civilizations without firing a shot. That's good, isn't it? Asked General Stone. We have the ultimate defense against alien invasion. Or the ultimate weapon for conquest, Morrison said quietly. The room fell silent again. The implications of what he had said hung in the air like a dark cloud. President Santos sat back down. Captain, are you suggesting that we might use these weapons offensively? I'm suggesting that we now have the power to do to other species what the Vexhai did to 43 civilizations. Except our methods are more effective. We don't need to conquer worlds physically. We can conquer them mentally. Dr. Chun nodded. The psychological warfare protocols could be used to make any alien species completely dependent on us. We could break their will to resist, make them question their own existence, and then offer to save them by taking control of their civilization. But we wouldn't do that, President Santos said. We're not conquerors. No, ma'am, Morrison replied. But our children might be? Or their children. What happens to humanity when we have the power to control the minds of entire species? What happens when that power becomes normal, expected, just another tool in our arsenal? Dr. Barnes closed her files. There's one more thing. The Vexhai weren't evil by their own standards. They genuinely believed they were bringing order to the galaxy. They thought the species they conquered were better off under their rule. They saw themselves as benevolent guardians. What's your point, Doctor? My point is that they started just like us. They developed superior technology, used it to defend themselves, and then gradually began to see other species as inferior beings that needed their guidance. The line between defense and conquest is thinner than we'd like to admit. Admiral Sullivan looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. So what do we do? The Vexhai are broken. Their offer of technology and knowledge is genuine. We could advance human civilization by thousands of years almost overnight. And the price? Morrison asked. The price is keeping the psychological warfare protocols. The price is knowing that we have the power to destroy minds instead of just bodies. The price is living with what we've become. President Santos was quiet for a long time. Finally she spoke. The Vexhai brought hell to New Haven, 2.3 million. People are still trapped in that nightmare landscape they created. We did what we had to do to stop them. Yes, ma'am, Morrison said. But the question is, what do we do now? We destroy the psychological warfare protocols and pretend we never developed them. Or do we keep them, knowing that someday we might use them again? Through the windows, the Vexhai ships continued their silent drift through space, filled with broken minds that would never recover from their encounter with humanity's darkness. The Vexhai had learned too late that humanity's greatest weakness was also their most terrifying strength. When threatened, humans didn't just fight back. They reached into the darkest corners of their imagination and found weapons that could destroy not just bodies, but souls. And now humanity had to decide whether to keep those weapons, knowing that in doing so, they might become the very thing they had fought to stop.